Good morning, Year 7, Mr. Holmes here. I'm here to show you how to do one of the first food practicals that we do in Year 7, and that is making some bread. We're going to make 4 bread rolls, and we're going to have some options about how we could flavour them, or we could just make them as plain bread rolls as well. The core ingredients that we're going to need for this is some fast action dried yeast. We're going to need 250 grams of plain flour. We're also going to need 150 ml of warm water and a pinch of salt. As an option to modify the flavour slightly, we're also going to use some oregano and some rosemary. Okay, that's a personal choice. You might not want to use those. You could use other herbs. You might want to leave them out. We're going to use a bit of butter. That's going to help change the texture of the bread slightly. And we're also going to use a little bit of sugar, which might be a strange thing to put into bread, but the sugar is going to help create a more crustier crust to our bread. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that my whole work surface is clear. I'm going to make sure that I've cleaned it all before I've started, so I've wiped it down with warm soap and water. All my equipment is out ready, so I've got my bowl, I've got my spoons, knives, forks and everything that I'm going to need to make it. I've taken jewellery off, I've taken watches off, I've washed my hands and I'm ready to go. You might want to wear an apron, that's up to you. You don't have to wear an apron, but it can get a little bit messy at times. So if you've got an apron at home, you can also put that on. The first thing we do is we put all of our dry ingredients, so there's my flour, a small pinch of salt, some herbs, again small handful of herbs, my fast action dried yeast, all of that's going to go in, and a spoon of sugar. So just kind of a half a tablespoon of sugar. That's going to go in there as well. And I'm going to mix these together. So just trying to make sure that these all combine. I've got a good mix throughout that flour. Once I've got all of those in, I'm going to get my butter. You don't have to use the butter like I said, it is an option. Just going to break my butter up a little bit. Place that in. And this is where your hands are going to get a little bit messy. This is why it's important to make sure they're washed before you started. And start breaking that up into the flour, rubbing it into the flour. This should only take you a couple of seconds because we are going to knead it more in a bit, and that's going to break it up even more. So once I've broken all my butter up into the flour, I'm then going to start adding in some warm water. I'm going to use what's called a well technique. So that means I make a well in the centre of the flour and I pour a little bit of water in at a time. So making a little bit of a well in the centre, getting a mixing spoon, pour the first bit of water in. Now it's really important that this water is warm. It doesn't want to be cold, because if you use cold water, then the yeast won't be activated. If you use water that's too hot, so if you use boiling water, or water that's too hot to put your hands in, then it will kill the yeast, and the yeast won't actually work in order to make your bread rise. Each time I put a bit of water in, I'm going to mix it around. I'm bringing more flour in from the edges of the bowl, and I'm slowly creating a dough in the centre. So it's all starting to come together. Put the last bit of my water in. Again, keep giving it a mix. Okay, it's quite difficult to mix it all the way around using the spoon, so I'm going to wipe all that off the spoon. I'm going to get my hands in there this time. I'm going to twist, and as I twist, it picks up all of the flour from the edges of the bowl. Keep twisting, and it's slowly going to start coming together into one ball of dough in the middle of your bowl. When you think you've got it into one ball of dough that you can press together and hold together, a little bit like this, we're going to take it out of the bowl. move the bowl to one side, move them to one side, and onto my clean work surface. Now I don't want it to stick on this work surface, so I've got a little bit of flour. I'm going to put it on my dough, put it on the work surface, and now what we're going to do is we're going to knead. So what I do is I press down and fold, press down and fold, press down and fold. And as I knead, this will go from a flaky ball of dough into a much more smoother combined ball of dough that looks a little bit like plasticine. Now I'm going to keep doing this for about 5 to 10 minutes. I'll occasionally need to add more flour just to stop it sticking to the table. Now the reason we're doing this is as I'm kneading, I'm building up what is called gluten. Gluten is like the elastic that's inside the bread. If I don't knead my bread at all and it has no gluten built up, then what will happen is it will rise far too quickly and all the bread will start splitting apart. If I knead it too much, so if I keep kneading this for 10, 15, 20 minutes, what's going to happen is it won't rise enough. The elastic, the gluten that I'm creating will be too strong and it will stop the bread from rising. So we've got to get it just right. You can see already it's starting to come into one nice ball of dough rather than be flaky. So I'm going to keep kneading this for about 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, my bread should be perfectly kneaded. I'll know it's perfectly kneaded because the test that I do is I put it into a ball, I take the palm of my hand, I push down and let go. And at the moment, it doesn't rise. When it's kneaded perfectly, it will bounce back up. So I'm just going to keep kneading this for 10 minutes and I'll come back to you in 10 minutes time to explain the next stage. Minutes, we've kneaded and we've got a nice ball of dough. We're going to just get it into a round shape and we're going to check that it's ready. So I'm going to take my palm of my hand, press down, let go, and this time it has started to bounce back. Slowly, but it started to bounce back. So that is a well kneaded ball of dough. Now we need to give the yeast the chance to do its job, to convert the starch that is in this yeast, that is in this bread, into carbon dioxide. And as it converts it into carbon dioxide, that will create bubbles and it's going to create air pockets inside there that are going to make the bread grow. So I'm just going to take my ball of dough, place it in a bowl, have a look to see how big it is, take a tea towel and place that over it. I'm going to leave that there for another 10 minutes. And when I come back in about 10 minutes time, you'll see that that ball of dough has grown in size, hopefully to about double its size. Now this is the perfect opportunity for you to start clearing away. I've already got a sink of hot water ready, so I'm going to take anything that I've used so far, get that washed up so I've got that job out of the way, ready for me to move on to the next stage. Okay guys, I'm back in the room with you. So we're going to have a check of this bread after about 10 minutes, and if we look at it, it has grown in size. Not quite doubled in size. If I left it a little bit longer, then it would double in size. But I'm going to move on from there. So what I need to do with this is reshape it into some dough balls. So first thing I'm going to do is get a chopping board. It's already been cleaned. I'm going to put a little bit of flour on my chopping board. This is just to make sure that my dough doesn't stick to it in a second. Get my dough out of my bowl. Now I don't want to press on it or knead it or do anything like that to it because that's going to knock the air out of it. What I want to do is get a sharp knife, cut it into 4 parts. Like I said, I'm doing this on the chopping board so it doesn't damage your work surfaces. And chop it again into another 2 and 2. Now my work surface is still clean, so I'm going to take my dough ball, I'm going to try and reshape it gently on the table and in my hands into a nice bread roll, cob, barm cake, whatever you want to call it, depending on where you're from. I'm Derbyshire, so it's a cob. Do it with all three in my hands, rolling it around, getting it into a nice dough ball shape. And with the third. And finally, with the fourth, I'm actually going to roll this one into a longer shape. Now, this one isn't going to rise as well because I'm rolling it out, which is going to knock some of the air out of it. But what I'm going to try and do with this one is a little bit of a plait. So I'm rolling it out. Try and get it a bit longer. You see them doing this in those pizza places. You're going to roll it out. Stretch it out. Every time I stretch it, it is knocking some air out, so it's less likely to rise as well. But that's not the point of this one. This one's about trying to do something a little bit fancy. Once I've got it long enough, I am going to, in fact, rather than a plait, I'm going to try and do a knot. So I'm going to roll it over, tuck that up, roll it over, tuck that down, we'll squeeze that together, and we've got a little bread roll knot. We need a baking tray. A little bit more flour just on there. Just going to stop your bread from sticking to it as it cooks. Carefully take your bread from there onto there, and we're going to put it in the oven. Now, I preheated this oven to 220 degrees. Okay, it's been on for about 10 minutes, so I'm going to put these into the middle shelf. I'm going to leave them there for 10 minutes. It's going to take about 10 or 12 minutes for them to bake. I'll know they're baked perfectly because when I take them out, they'll have a nice golden brown texture on the top. If they're still a bit pale, if they're still a bit white, leave them in. If they've gone a bit too brown, get them out straight away. We're looking for golden brown. I'll come back in 10 minutes. I'm going to tidy this up while they're cooking. So all I've got left is to get my bread rolls out and have a look to see what they've done like. Okay guys, I'm back with you and we are at about 12 minutes into the bake, so I'm going to have a check. Now remember, we're going to need oven gloves this time because it is going to be really hot. And out we come. Okay, I'm not going to put them straight down on the work surface because it might burn the work surface. So, put them down on top of my oven gloves. We have got a nicely baked set of rolls. So, how we're going to test that is we can see that there's hardly any cracking on the rolls. If I turn it over, tap it on the bottom, I can hear that it sounds hollow, which is the perfect baked bread. If it was a bit pale, or if I tapped it and it sounded quite dense, then it would need to go back in the oven for another couple of minutes until it browns up and sounds a bit more hollow. But pretty impressed, they're quite good. Even the plait has worked out a little bit, or the knot has worked out a little bit. So yeah, nice set of rolls there.